Hi, everyone, and welcome to Week 12 of our Government 2305 Introduction to American Government course. This week, we will continue our examination of the executive branch by discussing the federal bureaucracy. Our objectives this week are as follows. First, we will define bureaucracy and explain its major functions in our American system of government. Second, we will trace the expansion of the federal bureaucracy over time. Third, we will describe the size and structure of the executive branch today. Fourth, we will describe bureaucrats, who they are, and the specific regulations that govern their employment and the actions on a day-to-day basis. And lastly, we will explain how Congress and the President exercise their oversight powers to ensure that the actions of the bureaucracy comply with the Constitution, federal law, and regulations, and with their specific policy agendas where applicable. So let's begin by defining the federal bureaucracy. The federal bureaucracy implements the policies established by Congress or the President, which, in a divided government like we have right now, often conflict with each other. Generally, legislation provides guidelines for Congress's policy goals, and bureaucrats develop specific policies and programs that are based on guidelines and limitations included within legislation. A regulation is a rule that allows the government to exercise a level of control over the behavior and actions of individuals and corporations before they can be implemented, and regulations are developed and adopted by way of the notice and commitment or comment procedure, which is designed to allow public input into their content. Because of this, one of the most important roles of the bureaucrat are to research, develop, and plan for how new policies will be implemented and administered. This means that bureaucrats must make sure that the wishes of the public are balanced with the policy agendas of Congress and the President. In a perfect political environment, these would all be the same, but they often conflict with each other. This is one of the perplexing realities of democracy. Next, let's take a look at how and why the American bureaucracy has grown throughout our nation's history. Until 1828, American bureaucracy was rather small, but the election of Andrew Jackson saw a growth in the size of government with the advent of the spoils system, which rewarded individuals with government appointments in exchange for their financial support and their party loyalty. But the federal government's role in the daily lives of Americans was still limited, even though more and more people were needed to support the increased geographic area as the United States continued to grow westward. The progressive era of the late 1800s and early 1900s brought even more governmental regulation, and more services were delivered to citizens. In 1883, the Pendleton Civil Service Act was instituted to put an end to the spoils system and to replace it with a more modernized and merit-based system known as civil service. With the New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt, the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, and the Reagan Revolution, even more changes would be in store for the federal bureaucracy. Under FDR, America saw a dramatic increase in the size, responsibilities, and capacity of the federal bureaucracy as new government programs were put into place to combat the Great Depression and in reaction to the buildup of World War II. These included the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Social Security system. The Great Society of the mid-1960s saw a further expansion in the size, capacity, and activities of the bureaucracy with programs that targeted education, transit, health care, and civil rights. Under Ronald Reagan, conservatives took the opportunity to roll back the size and scope of government. But even these efforts, which we often describe as devolution, did not slow the growth of the federal government. Now let's talk about the structure of the modern federal bureaucracy. The Executive Office of the President contains organizations that are designed to support the President and to implement presidential policy initiatives. This includes the Office of Management and Budget, the President's Joint Council of Economic Advisors, and the rest of the President's cabinet. Today, the federal government employs millions of people both because of the sheer geographic size and population that must be served and because of the increased demand that Americans have had for government services. Let's face it, many Americans may complain about the size and complexity of the American bureaucracy, but they also seem to prefer and continue to rely on the services that the federal government provides. It is also true that one of the major reasons the federal bureaucracy has grown is that bureaucrats are budget maximizers and never pass up a chance to increase their own funding or to ensure their own continued existence. So how do we place controls on the bureaucracy? Since bureaucrats hold significant power and influence over government policy, elected officials must figure out how best to benefit from the knowledge and expertise that bureaucrats offer without giving them free rein to do whatever it is that they wish. One strategy would be to take away discretion and give direct orders, but this comes with a problem attached. By eliminating bureaucrats' any discretion, it also eliminates and limits the positive influence that their expertise may offer, and it creates even greater opportunities for inefficiency. To reduce or to eliminate what has been described as bureaucratic drift, lawmakers rely on two common strategies. First, they often change the way that agencies are organized and staffed, and second, they utilize standardized procedures to monitor agency actions. And this means making sure not only telling the agency what to do, but also to locate the agency into a proper fitting position within the federal governmental system itself. To monitor the actions of federal bureaucrats, both Congress and the President must use their oversight powers to make sure that agencies are inspected and monitored on a regular basis. And one way to do this is called police oversight, which involves constantly looking over an agency's shoulders. The second way is called fire alarm oversight, which is only used when elected officials respond to complaints about a bureaucracy as they arise, and often well after possible misdeeds have occurred. When agencies have been found to be in violation with the wishes of Congress or the President, legislation or an executive order may be used to send a clear directive to an agency or to remove its discretion over a policy or procedure. Now, recently, this has been seen by many to be very politically motivated, both in the actions of the President and of Congress. Because of an agency's perceived or real expertise or reputation, it may be able to fend off attempts to take political control by appealing to groups in society that benefit from its actions. Recent examples can be seen in climate change, where policy differences between agency experts and politically appointed agency leaders have been in the news. Attempts to control the bureaucracy help to explain at least part of why the bureaucracy is often seen as dysfunctional. The use of standard operating procedures often leads to the perception of red tape, which are inefficiencies in the provision of government services caused by overregulation and oversight. Simply put, many government regulations do work as intended and provide socially beneficial results, but others have unintended consequences that can be serious and detrimental to society. Just think about family separations at the border recently and the unintended consequences caused by federal actions within the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department. Okay, so that's what we need to know as we go into this week's lesson. Next, let's talk about what will be expected of you this week. First, you will have a discussion question, which is a research-based discussion on the immigration policies of the Trump administration and their intended and unintended consequences. You will be asked to view a brief video and read a New York Times article which explains the policy in detail and gives an overview of their intended results. The discussion question is this: did President Trump's immigration policies work? What were their intended results? What were the actual results? And what would you say were the unintended consequences of this policy, and what recommendations would you make if you were in the Border Patrol or the Department of Homeland Security? Most importantly, your policy proposal papers are going to be due starting Monday, April 22nd. I will give a detailed walkthrough video on this paper later this week, so until then, take a look at your homework instructions, which can be found in the Syllabus and Course Information tab of your main menu. You will prepare a one-page paper which has the following specific parts. First, the topic, which explains what your project will be about. This should be in the form of a research question. For instance, how can the problem of migrant immigration best be addressed by the present administration? Second, you will develop a 1 to 2 paragraph thesis statement which outlines the background of your problem and states a position as to how you believe it should be addressed. You are specifically asked to provide a background of your topic, your initial hypothesis, what you believe to be the solution, and a stated objective as to the purpose of your research project and its proposed outcomes. Third will be the project design section, which should specifically describe how you will conduct and organize your research, including what methods you will use to collect data or to investigate the problem, and a brief description of the evaluation and recommendations which will be included in the project. Fourth is the product section, which will be a brief discussion of the final project and its components. For instance, what type of product will you produce? A paper, a video, a PowerPoint. If you intend to do an alternative type of project, like a video or a PowerPoint, please be specific and email me with further instructions so that we can set some parameters and expectations as to what your final product would look like and include. Whatever type of project that you do, which I would assume for most of you is going to be the traditional research-based paper or literature review, you must include 10 to 15 research sources which you can find through the library databases. The majority of these should be peer-reviewed journal resources and not simply web pages found through the Google search engine. Okay, that covers what we need to do this week. Please let me know if you have any questions and have a great week. I'll see you in class and online.